Okay, great. Well, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you got involved in cannabis activism and a bit of your story. You had told me before, but for our readers and our viewers.
Yeah, I was, my first arrest for cannabis was, I was 19. Actually, my first two arrests for cannabis, I was 19, and it was for simple possession. And, it gave me a record, and that followed me around. That was in 1993 or 1994. And, it kind of followed me around ever since. Jobs weren't available, financial aid wasn't available. And I ended up moving to New Jersey, and I was able to get a job here. And in my course of living here, being that I am a cannabis enthusiast, despite the laws, like many people, using this medicinal herb, if you will, for spiritual purposes, medical purposes, and social use. And we couldn't afford it. My husband and I, we couldn't afford it. The prohibition prices are pretty high, and unfortunately, the medical cannabis in New Jersey right now is about the same, if not a little bit more than what you can purchase on the illicit market. And so we decided to grow our own, which happens to be a quarter of the price. Especially if you get really good at it, which my husband did. And we were able to have an abundance to make different products with, and use medicinally and however we wanted. And got arrested for that, and had to go through those really hard times. It's a felony in New Jersey. It's felony in most of the country, and to me it's equal access. Especially if a state is going to legalize, and most of the states have legalized home cultivation, and Virginia, actually, the state where I was first arrested, they're on the brink of legalizing with home cultivation for the purpose of, those who can't afford the higher price dispensary cannabis, especially people that have been harmed by prohibition. Our first case, I had to work two jobs, and paid tens of thousands of dollars for lawyers, and I still now have trouble getting a job. So it's something that follows people around for a long time. And this is just for, if we're saying that the plant is legal and decriminalized and descheduled, then it should have never been made legal in the first place. That's an issue that I think should be dealt with, and it's going to have to be dealt with.
What were your thoughts, or what were your feelings during the Christie administration? Since that is really sort of the beginning or a key moment for cannabis law in New Jersey.
Well, that's actually when I did start my activism, having been arrested first. I was also arrested in New Jersey for simple possession in 1997, and thankfully I already had a job, so that didn't check, so I was good there. But if I had to move or anything, that there would have been a background check for that. My life insurance actually wanted to, they gave me kind of like I had to be re-interviewed to keep my life insurance because of my arrest. I was honest, and you know, they grilled me on that. But yeah, during the Christie administration, I realized that, you know, there was a medical program in this state that was supposed to be compassionate, and it just wasn't being implemented in that way. And it really needed people's voices to kind of call it out that it's not being implemented the way it should. And it's still today, 10 years later, there's no delivery, there's very limited products available, limited ATCs, and it's just been really difficult. And that does stem from Christie era.
For those who
And
don't know, what is an ATC?
it's Alternative Treatment Center. It's a dispensary in New Jersey.
And when Phil Murphy came into when he came into Trenton, a lot of people who would identify as progressives saw in him their champion. And when he wanted to push through the legislature to legalize or put forward a bill that way to get it done, I guess you could say organically, rather than being forced to do so by the referendum that later on would happen. Did you have any um, optimism or pessimism at that time? Did you think that he would be successful at it? Do you think that he was his motives were sincere going forward with the legislative attempt?
Yeah, I do believe he was sincere. The first act he did as governor was sign an executive order to expand the medical cannabis program because it was so lacking. And you know, it's been a slow process to kind of get it going, but thankfully, Jake's Law was signed into law about a year and a half ago. And you know, it seems like a lot of what was in that law is hinging on also this legalization, because originally those bills were tied together, which, you know, it's kind of given a lot of the legislators' views on cannabis, you know, it was kind of a risky move, and it kind of put patients on the back seat again, and you know, it kind of lacks compassion. Thankfully, that was able to be separated, and they could focus, at least put some focus on that for a while. But it's still, a lot is hinging on the CRC, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, being set up, which it seems like they're kind of holding that until they finally get this legalization legislation signed into law.
How would you compare the trajectory that New Jersey has had and is going than, say, another state like Colorado, which has sort of been a trailblazer in a way in the country?
Um, some legislators believe New Jersey is trailblazing. I mean, we did start out with a plan, this being a matter of social justice, and that there had to be some equity provisions, which I'm grateful for. I think, you know, it definitely needs to be implemented, but it also take time, and that's kind of where I'm glad to see Senator Singleton introduced a home grow bill for patients. And as I testified in the Senate in December, you know, patients don't have time to wait for all of this regulations to be set up. So it's already there for them, and that it needs to move forward, and they need to have access for the time being, because they're going to open up the market to millions. And I know they want to do it sooner than later, yet they also have to provide for equity. I know myself, being someone harmed by prohibition, for me to get things together to start a business would take a lot longer than someone who's already prepared to be in business. So, you know, there's a little give and take that needs to happen there, and I hope that it does.
In your opinion and in your experience, who are your best advocates and the biggest obstructionists in the legislature?
Um, well,
If
for
you had
for
five.
me personally, that's a little, it's a little, you know, Senator Scutari has always been the champion of cannabis bills in the Senate, in the legislature. Um, and I thank him for bringing the conversation, and finally others are getting on board. And although they're for some form of legalization, it's more about regulation than liberation. A lot of advocates, longtime advocates I know, and you know, looking to other states, it's not only a matter of social justice, but it is a matter of liberating people. And to have it over-regulated, it's kind of, it's forcing people to buy into something rather than being able to have a product that they can have themselves. So it seems it's interesting that Senator Cardinale, who has long been a prohibitionist type legislator, is now saying, you know, if the people voted for this, people should be allowed to grow it. So it's been interesting to see different legislators' views change. I think the vote really, the people speaking on this, voting on this, really helped change some of their views. They know that it's popular. They know that the people want it. And you know, I think Senator Scutari is still, you know, he would still back a home cultivation bill, especially for patients. But leadership as a whole has been difficult because they really want it strictly regulated, and they want it all accounted for. So if you open it up to that, that would make it more difficult. But Senator Rice, I do understand that even with this law, that people of color would still be harmed, and that's why his push for not having even those under 21 have to deal with police or a stop and frisk situation. I understand that, but you know, I mean, if there's a discrepancy in the law, it should be, you know, kind of figured out so that there isn't any question when someone does come in contact with law enforcement, because even now with the amendment passing, they still seem to like arresting people for cannabis, unfortunately. So.
Yes, and I believe that the Attorney General last year had, leading up to, or at the time of the referendum vote, had suggested that prosecutors use their discretion when it comes to certain types of marijuana-related arrests. But that continues, of course, throughout the state. And do you have confidence that within the near future that there will be something to address the issues that you yourself have faced with having records expunged, or having some type of apparatus put in place where this would no longer be a hindrance or an obstacle going forward for people seeking places to live and employment and things of that sort?
Well, the decriminalization bill, and that was Senator Rice and Senator Cunningham, who also has prison reform bills, and the expungement bill. Senator Ruiz, I'm thankful for her work, and Assemblyman Holly also. But yeah, the decriminalization bill, I mean, I've been pushing for that since they introduced it in June, and it's still hinging on this legalization plan, unfortunately. And also the expungement bill was passed I believe it was over 2 years ago. And everything kind of has to move forward together. And so until, hopefully we'll see within 2 weeks
Right. Yes.
what will come to pass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, expungement is definitely needed, and the decriminalization bill will help with, some up to some criminalized, felonized activity, but still, I think there will be a lot of people that will fall into the category above the possession limits. I don't know how the police are going to differentiate between simple possession or distribution. That we'll have to see. I think a lot of it will still be left up to the courts. I do feel like even people under 21, they hear the word legal or legalized, and they probably think it's okay to grow their own. Like, a
That,
lot of people feel
that's
that
been a
way.
concern where a lot of people misunderstood, thinking that the referendum itself was a law and that now it was okay, whereas it is, in fact, it's not yet until that's done.
Right.
And because of that kind of misunderstanding and that lack of clarity out there, could you, in your own words, describe or differentiate when people say decriminalization as opposed to legalization, and what are the implications of those two? For example, Senator Rice, of course, is an advocate of decriminalization, but as opposed to legalization.
Right. And, that's interesting. I know the way that the amendment is written, it legalizes regulated cannabis and does not actually legalize marijuana. Marijuana is still criminalized in the criminal laws, so that doesn't change unless the decriminalization bill passes with it. So the decriminalization is where they don't arrest you. And in this particular bill, it also does not allow for it gives parents some more rights, students. It doesn't really infiltrate a person's life as much as the laws do now. With legalization, it kind of sets up a regulatory system in which adults can buy cannabis. So one is more set up for the industry, while the other is to kind of clear up some of the criminal laws, so that people aren't still getting arrested.
So a lot of municipalities in New Jersey, uh, my own included, preemptively banned the retail of marijuana products before Murphy even finished talking about how he wanted to put it through the legislature. They had jumped on it to make sure that it was not going to be in their town. Uh,
Right.
there's a perception that this industry, if brought into their towns, would degrade their town, the quality of life. Some towns, I believe most of them, used it as like a zoning ordinance to
Yeah.
restrict that. Um, what do you say to those local leaders who are afraid or who have reservations about this becoming some type of a store down the street or something like this? Is it going to turn their towns into a wasteland, or is it going to bring jobs and money? What do you think?
It's interesting. There was a few reports out in the last year that show that property values actually increase where there is a dispensary. And yes, there's jobs and availability of legal cannabis. If you know, towns are worried about the nefariousness. I mean, this is where businesses actually contribute to the economy and the livelihood of the town. Also, there are reports that show where there is legal cannabis access, the opioid deaths are fewer. And in New Jersey, I think this is a very significant point given, the opioid, we're one of the states with the highest opioid deaths, if not the highest. And I think it's like a switch that kind of needs to happen, and these towns really should, recognize this.
One of the things that you have been a super strong advocate of is home grow, and that clashes in a sense with some people who feel that this should be something like the tobacco industry or the alcohol industry, where it is regulated and then subsequently taxed, so that they could use that as a revenue generating device, I guess is how they see it. Where does home grow fit into that? Where should it be in the discussions amongst the people who make our laws going forward? And what kind of considerations should they have with what that could bring to people?
Well, I think their consideration right now, leadership, I know that they, like I was saying, they want this strictly regulated. One, to ensure that it doesn't reach the hands of those under 21. And also, to account for revenue. And I feel like the people's vote is a little bit different in that view. When you say legal, they think it should be legal to grow. It is the garden state, and given that they're, that's the legislator's point. I think that conversation, they probably won't seriously entertain it until the adult use market is kind of set up, because they're trying to prevent the illicit market. The problem with that is, the people that voted for this, the people of the state, they want, they're the consumers. They're the ones who are going to be buying this, and they don't want to have to be forced into buying it from certain growers or places that were necessarily chosen, without them. So, and they would like to have their own. I mean, in the law, it says it's to be regulated. They wanted to set this up like alcohol. And in New Jersey, people are allowed to brew their own beer and make their own wine. And it's like that's where the craft business kind of is birthed. And I think that it helps innovation, and actually boosts purchases from alternative treatment centers or dispensaries. And they would likely be the provider of seeds and clones and plants. So there's still revenue to be made, and it's good spirit to me. There's there's a big kind of hole in a lot of this discussion with legislators. There's a lot of people that use cannabis spiritually, and to have it seemingly all about the money, and it really doesn't, it kind of takes away from the good spirit of a simple plant that can grow, in anyone's backyard.
To that point, some people do have concerns over safety, where they would feel that a regulated industry would make sure that whatever it is that was being consumed wasn't harmful. In the period of prohibition, of course, when people were making their own booze, you would hear about, people making bathtub gin, and people go blind and stuff like that. You don't hear about that so much anymore. Rare are those revenue men chasing, guys with stills in the woods. But are those fears justified in any way? Is there a safety component that should be taken into consideration, or do you think that that's not valid, that that's not really something that should be something that people worry about?
Well, for me, that actually speaks to it being legal, where the state can provide guidelines to people, and ensure that the people know how to produce their own product properly and safely. And yeah, I mean, I haven't seen problems with people brewing their own beer in the state in the last since that's been the case. So
The last 90 years or so. Well, that's good. We're glad for that. So, because I don't want to use up all your time too, but what is in your own words, like the message, if you can condense, like the thing that you would like most New Jersey residents to keep in mind as this discussion goes forward, and as they talk with their local legislators, their mayors, their councilmen, who are either considering these types of preemptive bans, or if they're looking to approve businesses or dispensaries that may come into their town. What is something that the regular person, the average Joe on the street, who may not have thought of something of this nature before, what's something that you would impart to them?
I think that given the way that the law is written, it provides for micro licensing, which is a big part of the social justice piece of where people can get into the business fairly easily from communities that have been harmed by prohibition, or people that have been directly harmed by prohibition. And a lot of the cannabis community likes to keep it smaller, kind of fearful of the corporatization and larger scale growers and larger scale providers, MSOs and ISOs. And so I think that I know some advocates, whether a town is thinking of banning or allowing, they're kind of trying to redirect the conversation to allow for smaller business, mom and pops, to kind of come in and really be a part of this industry.
Thank you so much, Joanne. I appreciate you talking with us and taking the time out. And as always, a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, it's great. Thank you.